Joe San Diego, and with me, Ben Schneider from Grid Life Encore and LastCar.info. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You too can invest in the Grid Network by clicking on the link in the video description. Get your name on the board. Newest member will have your name gold, as Matthew does, and we'll mail you the Grid Network stickers. We've already sent out to all our Patreon their Grid Network stickers. And of course, if you want to do a one-time investment, buy me a coffee, or you're watching us live YouTube Super Chat, but also the thanks button. If you didn't catch us live on the air, you can hit that thanks button, and you could give a specific amount to a particular member of the Grid Network. Can you show your appreciation and thank them for being on the air? And be sure to hit the bell icon and subscribe to us. That's the easy way to support the Grid Network throughout 2023 as we wrap up this year and 2024. And Ben, one of the big, I think, highlights Wednesday, we had our exclusive interview with Beth Peretta from Women in Motorsports North America and Women with Drive 3 Fueled by Mobil 1 Summit. Great interview. Encourage everyone to check out the video on Grid tonight. Alex, Matt, all of them discuss about the summit, a little bit of IndyCar, questions from the viewers, and just a great job by the team from the Grid Tonight group. Link in the video description.
Yeah, I completely echo what you're saying, Joe. It was a great interview, and credit to Alex and Matt. They did a great job. I guess you can say yesterday. It's yesterday as we're recording this. Obviously, the show will be up either tomorrow or Saturday, I guess. But they did a fantastic job, I thought, with the interview, and Beth was fantastic as well. Great to hear her encouragement and what the plans for her programs are going forward in 2024, and hopeful to see Pareto Autosport back on the Indianapolis 500 grid next year as well. I know that was one of the final questions they asked, and she had no comment. She said that she could not confirm or deny anything at this moment, but we'll continue to keep our fingers crossed for the best in that regard as well.
Continue to keep our fingers crossed. And one of the drivers we talked a little bit about, was mentioned in that interview, was about sports cars, the number of female racers, and one of the big standouts lately, Doriane Pin from the Iron Dames. Overall, we got to go to IMSA Motul Petit Le Mans race weekend to close out the 2023 IMSA season, and the Iron Dames were present with Doriane Pin, as I mentioned, Rahel Fry, and Michelle Gatting. Now, Ben, I got to say this. When it comes to Doriane Pin, she put out a very impressive effort early on in that race, even leading the GTD class, fast laps, even at one point having the fastest lap of the entire event. She is 19 years old. We're talking about how impressive she was this year. And one of the big things, this is her third start with IMSA, 18th at Daytona, 16th at Watkins Glen, and now 12th in class, 35th overall. Being a rookie in IMSA, racing in the United States, Doriane Pin is originally from France, done a lot of European racing. How would you grade her season and performance?
Joe, it's kind of tough to do so because, like you mentioned, only her third start of the year. It's not a huge sample size to work with. But, taking everything into consideration, obviously her age, like you mentioned, only being 19 years old, coming here to America for a rookie IMSA season, I thought she did a very solid job, getting up to speed. And, a driver that young coming over here for the first time, you can't expect any driver that age to set the world on fire right away. Those that do are, considered exceptional, and we give them all credit where it's due here. But, for most drivers, when you're still in your teenage years, it's all about learning and gaining the experience. And then 2 to 3 years down the road, and then really 5 years down the road, let's see what you're really made of. Let's see what you can really do. I'm very optimistic about Doriane Pin and what she's going to be able to do in the coming years as well, based on what she's done with Iron Dames already over in Europe and now coming over here to IMSA. I have very high expectations because I think she's shown a lot of potential. But again, only 3 races here. Solid results, solid performances, but it is kind of a small sample size to say one way or the other. So we'll see what that program can do going forward. And then I think we'll have a little bit better idea of where that might take her in 2 or 3 years down the road.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. There's so few starts, her performances, especially at Motul Petit Le Mans, just taking a lot of attention from people for all the good reasons. Very good, but full season, I think once we get to that grind and more results, I think it'll be really showing. The one thing too, the Iron Dames this year, Overall, I say they have to be very pleased with the way they have been having a good season. We have Rahel Fry, Michelle Gadd, and of course Sarah Bovey, who does some races as well too. And one of the things, 24 Hours of Le Mans, fourth place in class, they just missed a podium. They are second in the World Endurance Championship LMGTE standings with the 8 hours of Bahrain remaining. All this been, and here's the thing, they switched from Ferrari last year, Ferrari customer car essentially, to now Porsche. Yesterday, Beth Peretta mentioned how sports cars seen many opportunities arising with the popularity of the Iron Dames and Doriane Pin. As we enter what many are calling the golden age, and it's been a great year so far in sports car racing in general, how long do you think it'll be for a female racer in the hypercar GTB class? Is it not far in the future?
I would hope not. And like I mentioned, I think Dorian Pin could be a candidate for such a drive a couple of years from now. Again, let's not rush things. Let's make sure we're taking our time here and seeing what she can do in GT classes, and kind of reevaluate things from there in a couple of years. But with how much momentum's around the Iron Dames right now and their fan base, and how popular they are, how successful they've been. I totally agree with what Beth Peretta was saying in yesterday's interview, and I think that it's very much a possibility that we could see a female competitor, a female driver in the hypercar class in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I feel pretty. I mean, especially what I've seen Dorian Pins doing racing. One driver we didn't talk about, we saw in LMP2, was the driver from Germany, essentially Sophia Flores. I was spaced out her name, but she's been in LMP2. Of course, that's one below. I think there's not going to be too long until we see a factory team looking at a person like Dorian Pin or somebody saying, we want you in our top ride. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens in supercars. But Ben, we got to talk about drag racing in the United States. It's been a very exciting season over there.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. I know we don't talk too much about the NHRA on our other shows. It's not a part of our grid ranking because it's a very different discipline, but we do have a lot of very strong female competitors in that series. So let's give them some spotlight here on this show. NHRA coming down to their final few events, which looks like last year, Top Fuel and Pro Stock might have female champions again, but a different driver leading the way in both of those categories. Leah Pruitt leads the Top Fuel points with 2 races remaining. She's 4 points ahead of Doug Coletta. Joe, last year, she wasn't as much of a factor. This year, up front of the points in the competitive field. Can she pull off the title?
I think she can. It's been a very competitive Top Fuel class. The big thing is making sure you qualify well and just come out fast out of the gate. She has some big competition there. We still got Brittany Forster, the defending champion for Top Fuel. Not exactly having the greatest season compared to last year. Doug Coletta, he wants to get that championship. Leah Pruitt, for me, this has been a surprise because last year she did make it to the countdown, which is their equivalent of the NASCAR playoffs. Overall, solid. But this year, though, just phenomenal job, I say. Just doing great, being in championship contention, and overall, I think one of the big things is if she could continue the consistency, she's going to get that championship. You got 2 races left. And one of the big things, too, Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart is a factor for Leah Pruitt. I think just as he's been in championship scenarios, work with Leah, get her ready in the mode, in the zone as they approach this season, but not distracted to the point where it could cost you a championship. She has a really good shot at it, and I think it'll be a really big story if she gets it. I feel it's a little bit under the radar now, but if she was to claim that championship, we know because of Tony Stewart being there, that's probably going to pick up some extra media attention. I'm surprised it's not picking up more media attention right now.
Well, to that point, Joe, I think, Dave Moody was actually saying this on his SiriusXM NASCAR show a couple of months ago, and we'll talk about Erica Enders here in just a moment. But because of the success of female drivers in NHRA, it's not as big of a story anymore because it's so commonplace to see them succeed. Whereas, if a female driver is competitive or winning a race in, ARCA or NASCAR or IndyCar, it's a much bigger story because we don't see that nearly as often. But I think it's just maybe the fact that it's not getting as much attention, ironically, is actually a testament to how successful they've been over the last several years. And let's talk about Erica Enders and that success. The Nevada NHRA Nevada Nationals are next week. It's another opportunity for her. 47 career wins now. That's a new record for most wins by a female competitor in the NHRA. Despite a slow start to the season, she now leads the points by 85 and is gaining a lot of media attention for this achievement and record. Beth Peretta acknowledged this in our interview with her earlier this week. Enders is going for her 6th title in NHRA competition, her 2nd in a row, 1 away from a total of 7. That would put her tied for 4th in most championships by NHRA driver, tying Warren Johnson for Pro Stock and Kenny Bernstein from Top Fuel and Funny Car. So, Joe, in light of what we were just talking about there, how incredible is it to see a driver achieve such an incredible milestone in the NHRA?
What she is doing is really setting the bar higher and higher, not just for the drivers in the NHRA or Pro Stock, but especially for female drivers. Shirley McDowney won the Legends, 3-time champion. Erica Enders is way ahead of her. When you look at the top 12 drivers when it comes to championships, Erica is the only female driver right there on that list. And when she does get up to, essentially, if she does, we still got a couple races to go. If she claims that championship and gets on that list, there's only 3 drivers ahead of her. Only 3. And one of them is John Force, Tony Schumacher, and Bob Glidden from Pro Stock, one of the professors of Pro Stock racing. She will be in some big company if she could get another championship, be on that list. And I think this is just really exciting time for the National Hot Rod Association, because this isn't like we're seeing throughout motorsports. It's very competitive. John Force, there was a time and period where you knew he was going to be the top funny car championship. That's not the case. Top Fuel is so competitive, and Pro Stock has always been so competitive. You could have a person like Bob Glidden or Warren Johnson dominate for a while, but what she's been doing is just phenomenal to get to the point where she's going to tie Warren Johnson and just one more Pro Stock driver ahead of her for most championships. Erica Enders, I think, is truly setting a high bar. It's great to see that Beth Peretta, a lot of female racers were acknowledging her record of having the most wins. She could still get 2 more wins and just set that bar higher and be an inspiration for many more. And in my opinion, I think it's definitely one of the highlights of the National Hot Rod Association was how she had that slow start. I remember early on we were on the air talking about she's struggling. We saw Cameron Caruso got a win early in the season. What about her? She has responded. She's coming back. That video looks like we were talking about at the time, but some people say, well, that aged poorly. Hey, she is proving what you do in motorsports. You never give up. You keep fighting, and this is why she has so many championships. I think she's going to get another one in 2 races' time.
Well, next weekend is the Nevada Nationals. Like we were saying, that will set up the championship scenarios for the major NHRA classes. We will be following it right here on this show with the Grid Network. But now let's shift gears, Joe, over to the F1 Academy.
Yeah, F1 Academy weekend pretty much getting started, up and underway. Full recap next weekend, but several news items to discuss before the United States round at Circuits of America. The 2024 season was released, and it's very interesting. We have essentially 21 races with 7 race weekends, continuing the 3-race format. Starting off the season, we have the Jeddah Corniche Circuit, a high-speed street circuit, the Miami Grand Prix racetrack. That's the first 2 rounds. So, Ben, I got to say, we start off in Saudi Arabia, then we go to the United States. 2 countries are very different track records when it comes to women's rights. Saudi Arabia, being that is the first out of 3 Middle Eastern countries to host the F1 Academy, and it was in 2018 women were allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. How surprised were you to see Saudi Arabia kick off the F1 Academy season?
I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm really not. And I was saying this in a group chat with a couple of friends earlier this week when the calendar was released. IndyCar comes out, and it's like we have the weakest, most disappointing, worst schedule of 2024. And then Formula One comes out and says, hold our Academy, while we have 43% of our season in the Middle East. I mean, this is very, very disappointing to see, but it's not surprising. This is where all the money is. And I think that that's a key point that's getting lost in all this. I think, it's more hypocrisy that we've seen from the FIA and from Formula One in the past to push the We Races One motto and message, and then to turn around and go kick off our F1 Academy season in a country where, like you mentioned, Joe, women have only been allowed to drive street cars legally for the last half decade now. I mean, it's a country that is so far behind when it comes to women's rights and when it comes to, important things, going on in all around the world right now. Saudi Arabia is so far behind the United States and other countries around the world, like you were mentioning, Joe. And then to follow it up with Qatar and then Abu Dhabi later to close out the year, have 3 of your 7 rounds. It doesn't even feel like a world championship. Forget the Middle East. If you have that much of your schedule is dominated by one particular region in the world, it's very difficult to look at that as a true world championship. It reminds me of what some of the series were going through in 2020 with the pandemic, and obviously much different circumstances, much more difficult to travel around the world in that scenario. But, it's the same sort of idea here. If you're not traveling, all around the world and so many of your events are, centralized in one location, it's very difficult to see it that way. So, like I said, there's certainly disappointment here. I would have liked to have seen, if we're going to base it in a particular region, I think Europe certainly makes the most sense. But, I would have to think that this is where the money is. And I suppose from a business standpoint, I get it. But from a moral standpoint, it is still very, very frustrating to see. But at the same time, I can't really say I'm surprised either.
When it comes to the money and the FIA Formula One, we know that's a big factor, especially Saudi Arabia. They put out a lot of money. So I was surprised in that aspect where they're going to host this round. We know there's other sports, particularly World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE. When they've gone there first few times, no female wrestlers. Then they started introducing them, and still mixed reactions. Some people not ready for that change. Now we're going to have female racers racing there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if this just helps progress in Saudi Arabia. But I have to agree with you, when it comes to 3 races in the Middle East, it does make you wonder, okay, are we totally on the money? Because we know Miami, that's a race where FIA Formula One, they're putting a lot of investment in that. Zandvoort, which I'll get to later on, Barcelona, Marina Street Circuit, they're there, but I feel like those are just 3 races where it's like, okay, just about every driver's been to. So it's been really interesting to see this season be released. And overall, I have to agree with you. It just feels like it just sort of felt a bit of a letdown because, as I mentioned, Barcelona, Zandvoort, Marina Street Course in Singapore. Those will be after Miami. Singapore, we know that's one of the most demanding tracks for racing drivers. So I was a bit surprised to see that be added in there. Barcelona, so many drivers have tested there at some point, raced there, very much a very busy track. And Zandvoort, that has hosted a W Series race. We know Bicycle Visitor was a huge fan favorite when she was racing there. Considering we got 3 Middle Eastern tracks and then we have these 3 races, is this a good selection where you feel like they were missing out on some more iconic tracks like Spa-Francorchamps, where W Series racing, or other ones that I feel would get more fans invested in? Hey, these are must-watch races.
Well, again, I think it comes down to where the money is. I think that's ultimately where decisions are being made. I'm happy to see Barcelona. I think that's one that makes a lot of sense. I would certainly prefer COTA, which they're doing this year, over the Miami circuit, just because I think that circuit produces better racing and is a better venue for Formula One cars or single-seater open-wheel cars, just generally speaking. Zandvoort, not too much of a surprise, I suppose. But again, I think I would rather swap that for a more historic track like Spa. Not to say that Zandvoort doesn't have any sort of history, but I'm just thinking when you think of like crown jewel, big Formula One races, popular Formula One tracks, I think, Spa or Monza would certainly fit the bill just a little bit more. We've only had Zandvoort back on the schedule for a few years now. And then Singapore, like you mentioned, Joe, certainly a surprise to see that as well. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was actually kind of the downfall of the W Series, if I'm remembering correctly. One of their final races, maybe the final race before they went into administration. That series ultimately came to a close. So some bad memories from that ordeal still, perhaps. But I'm sure with the full backing of Formula One, F1 Academy probably doesn't have to worry about that as much. But like you mentioned, we were just talking about, the heat in Qatar for the Formula One drivers just recently. And then that's always a talking point in Singapore with how long that race has been historically and, how hot that track can get. I'm sure it's going to be very physically demanding for these young female drivers. And we'll see what kind of racing that provides us when we get there next year. But, it's an interesting calendar to say the least, with these tracks that they've chosen. Again, I don't think it's a great schedule, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the series as a whole is still a great opportunity for these young drivers to have a platform like this to race, and looking forward to seeing what 2024 holds on the track for all of them.
Yeah, there's one thing I feel at least is a benefit. They're going to be sharing the race weekends with Formula One compared to this year, where all except Circus America, they were not with Formula One. So at least they'll get the media attention that way. And of course, they're going to be broadcasting all the races, which will be a nice big bonus for everyone, since this year that hasn't been the case till Circuits of America.
Yeah, and you're right. Overall, certainly, I would say it's a net plus year to year. I still think there's a lot of room for improvement in the calendar. If we're going to set something, what we're being used to long term, I wouldn't like to see a repeat of this every year, but I think it is a step in the right direction, but probably could have been a much bigger step if they tried a little bit harder or hadn't prioritized the money situation.
Think about improving the calendar. Qatar, Abu Dhabi, they'll end the season. 7 race weekends over essentially 10 months. The first round, we're going to be talking about this essentially is 1 race per month. There's a break in April, no race in October. In fact, it's not till November 30th. Then we have Qatar, and then the following weekend, Abu Dhabi. So 7 race weekends spread out that long. Does having a season that spread out hurt building the fan base, or essentially still a brand new series?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not perfect. The schedule pacing could be a lot better, and I'd like to see an improvement of that in the future. Again, great that they'll be partnered alongside Formula One and as a support series and everything. But yeah, I mean, I think it does hurt. It reminds me actually of a situation with Formula 2, where they have Monza in the beginning of September, and then the last couple of years now, it's been almost a 3-month vacation before you come down to the final race weekend in Abu Dhabi. And all of us Americans certainly following that situation very closely last year with Logan Sargent's super license points, and wondering if he was going to hold on to the threshold that he needed to get that, which ultimately he did. But it made for a very long waiting period, and him being able to use that time off to go run a few FP1 sessions to get a little bit closer and inch his way further to that magic number. But I think when you have that much time off, you're just left waiting around, and yeah, I think it can be difficult for the fans to maintain that interest in that level of investment that they're willing to put into this series here, especially for a new series like F1 Academy. The schedule pacing certainly is not great, and then to have 2 back-to-back kind of to close out the year, there's certainly, like I said in the previous question here, a lot of room for improvement in terms of where the calendar should be long term. But again, I understand it's a new series, and I'm not advocating for a super long, grueling, taxing calendar just so that we can say we're having a race every so often here. Especially if we're going to do 3 races per round, I think that 21 races certainly isn't a bad total to be at. I mean, heck, that's roughly where Formula One's been the last several seasons. But yeah, I mean, the massive breaks like that, I think, especially when they're coming at the end of a year, or you have something like you have your first race of the year, and then you have a lot of time off. I think if you're going to do a long break like that, maybe kind of make it like Formula One summer break. Try to centralize it in the calendar a little bit. But either way, I think when you start talking about 2, even 3 months almost, I think that's when it starts to get a little bit difficult for the fans to stay on board.
It's a little bit difficult, and my initial thought was, okay, I know Formula One, we got race weekends with Formula 2, Formula 3. Not a whole lot of tracks could accommodate 3 different series. We still haven't seen those calendars for 2024, but once it comes out, I'll be really curious to look into which tracks have Formula 2, Formula 3, and then just didn't have Formula 4. But the F1 Academy, I feel like, okay, this is a brand new series. You get that crowd excited, but then we'll see you in a month. We'll see you in a month again, and then we'll see you in 2 months. It's like, it really gets hard, I think, to build up that momentum. They'll have the work cut out to keep up that momentum, and I think the big thing they're banking on is the Formula One interest that has been growing year after year will help that. But I think, as the folks at Grid Tonight yesterday were talking about, there could be a bubble looming. So it'll be really interesting to see if that F1 interest continues on and transfers over. One,
Yeah, and real quick, Joe, if I can just follow up on that, I think that further drives home the importance of being a support series for Formula One, because if you think about the average fan going to Circuit of the Americas this weekend, they're going to be there all 3 days. Maybe they don't even know what F1 Academy is, but then they hear about it, they see it on the track because they're a sports series to the main event, and maybe that sparks their interest, and maybe you build a new fan out of that. So I think being aligned with the F1 calendar is going to go a long way in helping build that fan base up in 2024. Again, the schedule is not great, but being aligned with Formula One is great, and that's an edge that they're going to have over what they had this year. And then, of course, the TV broadcasts. I mean, that's beating a dead horse based on how much we've talked about that on this show and how ludicrous it was that up until the finale we didn't have broadcasts anywhere. But it looks like it's going to be in a much stronger position heading into 24 than it was at the start of this year.
much stronger position in 2024. One driver that feels like they're entering in a stronger position, Bianca Bustamante. She'll be with ARC Racing next year, and she signed with the McLaren Driver Development Program, sending big news across. So essentially, we know each team will have a representative on the grid. Bianca Bustamante, the first one that's going to be in the F1 Academy and part of the McLaren Driver Development. Now, Bianca has 2 wins this year, 7th in the points. There's some inconsistency, so she could be higher up in the points, but it is what it is. One of the big things compared to last year when she was in the W Series, 1 top 10 finish, 17th in the standings, not scoring points or just not finishing the races. I feel like Bianca is one of the most improved drivers. And do you believe F1 Academy has started to show the visible progress that it's working towards having a female in F1?
And Joe, I'm going to do my Larry McReynolds impression here and say pump the brakes just a little bit on the second part of that question. I think, we were just wrapping up the first year of this new series. And I think we are in a very good position. Obviously, the Roden application that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of momentum trying to get a female driver onto the Formula One grid as soon as possible. But again, like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, let's not rush things. Let's, take, at least 3 to 5 years and, see where these F1 Academy drivers, can end up after they, end up like Marta Garcia is probably going to win the championship. And, Bianca Bustamante getting this deal with McLaren is absolutely fantastic. I think she's thoroughly deserving of it. I think she's a great young talent. But, again, if we're talking about Formula One drives with McLaren, I think we've got a long way to go before we start having those conversations. It's great that she's in the family. It's great that, she's going to have that support. But again, let's see if she comes back to F1 Academy and can improve on her position this year and improve on the couple of wins she's had. And let's have the conversation from there. But, you can't say enough about the improvement from this year from last year, I should say, over to this year, like you're mentioning, Joe, with her W Series season in 22, now winning in F1 Academy in 23. That makes me very optimistic for some exponential improvement even next year. And, the sky's the limit from there, going down further down the road in 25 or 26, if you will. So, I think there is certainly visible progress being made to answer the question. But again, if we want to talk about when might we see a female driver on the grid, again, I think we're at least probably 5 years away from having those serious conversations and actually making something like that happen. But the progress that we have seen so far is great to see, and we should acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, we're seeing great progress. I think overall, the fact that this is the first driver that's going to be McLaren representative in the F1 Academy. One of the big things I feel that was just sort of the missing piece in the W Series. There was no real F1 connection besides later on when they were part of the F1 race weekends. There was no, okay, you're part of representing this team. I think this was a smart move. And the big thing I know early on, when it was first announced F1 Academies come in and we'll have a focus on some of the younger drivers rather than some of the veteran drivers that have been a driver a longer time. We're talking about, well, what about these drivers that, going to be out of the picture? Bianca Bustamante, she was overshadowed last year by the dominance of Jamie Chadwick, bicycle visitor Emma Kymäläinen. And I feel like that really just sort of helped her confidence this year to where she's winning races. We still see Nira Marti, of course, towards the front. She's always phenomenal talent. Marta Garcia as well, too. But even the surprise for me was been Abby Pullen, who just still has not gotten that win yet. I almost feel like F1 Academy with these Formula 4 cars might be almost that good level compared to W Series. It sounds weird to say, even though they're F3 cars, I feel this seems to be a better start compared to what we have going in. The progress I feel is visible. We're seeing it, step in the right direction. But yeah, I would say, like you, pump the brakes on. It's probably going to be 5, maybe 6 years till we see a F1 driver as female and racing full time.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Jamie Chadwick, and I know we'll follow up on her because she had some news that came out this week as well, Joe. But we should talk about. But it's important to remember she's a part of the Williams Driver Academy as well. But I think what the amount of involvement that or contact with Jenner Racing that Williams would have had last year in the W Series. McLaren's obviously going to be much more heavily and much more directly involved with what Bianca Bustamante is doing in F1 Academy going forward, as all the Formula One teams will be. And again, I still, feel a little bit sour about how the whole W Series situation played out. I would have liked to have seen the two series come together a little bit more than they did, rather than just, kind of seeing one replace the other and W Series, running into financial trouble. I think there would have been an opportunity there to combine resources and make this an even bigger and better thing. But, the fact that we have this commitment now from all the Formula One teams to align themselves with this series, I think is very, very good for the future of F1 Academy.
Strong future for F1 Academy. Overall, it's going to be really interesting to see everything that develops leading up to 2024 as more drivers are represent F1 teams in the next season of F1 Academy. We'll be covering it. One of the big things, of course, we used to cover the W Series. Jamie Chadwick, as you mentioned, she will be back 2024 with Unready Autosport, and it's going to be in the NXT Indy Next again. One of the big things I noticed been when it came to the official graphic announcement, we saw the Unready logo, white background, blue letters representing the same colors as the logo on Unready, but there was no DHL presence at all. We know DHL is not sponsoring Unready Autosport, so most likely they're not longer involved with Jamie Chadwick. Overall, do you feel like, since we got this confirmation, it seems like we got some sort of sponsorship deal in place compared to some drivers where we've seen they're racing hoping they get a sponsor and hopefully get one before too far in the season, and then they have to drop out.
Yeah, well, she's with a great name in Andretti and a great team, so I have no doubt that they'll be able to find some sort of partners for her to come on board. But obviously losing DHL is a massive, massive blow, especially for the Indy Next program, like you were mentioning. That's a company that has been with Andretti for, my goodness, 13 years. I'd go back to the 2011 Indianapolis 500 when Ryan Hunter-Reay got bumped. And I think, that's part of why, even though I very strongly disagree with the stance that Michael Andretti took on bump day, he mentioned that the fact that they were able to buy out that AJ Foyt car for Ryan Hunter-Reay to still end up making the race after all was a big reason why they were able to keep DHL on board. And then obviously that partnership carried on for more than a decade after that. It's unfortunate that it's come to an end this year. But in terms of what it means for Jamie Chadwick going forward, I'm happy that she's going to get another year in Indy Next. I think she showed some strong runs, particularly towards the end of the year. I think she's got a long way to go on the ovals if she's serious about an IndyCar future and an Indy 500 future. But on the road courses, I think, especially, Joe, when you were out there at Portland, her best finish of the year in a sixth-place run, certainly a step above where she was at the start of the year. Now let's see if she can continue to keep that improvement going here in 2024. I'm glad that she's going to get that opportunity. Again, it's going to hurt not having the DHL backing and sponsorship, but she's still in an Andretti car, and that's going to be a very, very strong car for her to drive next year in Indy Next.
Very strong car, and we know without the DHL sponsorship, she's still going to be with a great organization, as you mentioned. Now comes the question, okay, this is your second season. People are going to be anticipating improvement. We know there's drivers that have come in first season, just done really great, move up the IndyCar ladder. When it comes to Jamie Chadwick next year, do you feel that sense of pressure that she has to deliver better results essentially begins immediately with that first round of the season?
Yes, I think, again, you're driving for a team like Andretti, and it's no longer your rookie year. The vast majority of these tracks you're not going to be going to for the first time. You'll have some experience to build on. I know it might sound like very lofty goals or lofty expectations, but when you're driving for Andretti, the goal is to win. And to be quite frank, she didn't come particularly close to doing that this year. I know it was her rookie season, but At the bare minimum, you've got to see a handful of podiums next year. I think that would be indicative of a step forward and improvement from year to year. And quite honestly, like I said, you're driving for a team like Andretti. The goal is to win. I think she should be competing for wins in 2024, given the equipment that she's going to have. So we'll see if she can take that step forward. And if she can take that step forward, then maybe you start talking about a partial IndyCar schedule in a couple of one-off entries in 25 and then full-time in 26, or who knows what happens from there. If she doesn't take that step forward, maybe you spend one more year in Indy next, and then if there's no improvement from there, maybe you reevaluate things and go take your racing career somewhere else. Because I think Jamie Chadwick is certainly a talented driver. We just need to see that improvement in Indy next this year to know if IndyCar is going to be the long-term home for her as we continue on throughout the 2020s.
Yeah, IndyCar, very competitive, as Beth Peretta mentioned yesterday in the interview. And of course, we know all the drivers at Indy next. They're just as competitive because they know what's up on the line. That's a step up towards NTT IndyCar Series. Of course, we're going to be following all of that throughout 2024. Now we come to our shining moment, Ben, before we close out the program. When it comes to your one shining moment, what stood out for you?
Well, we haven't done the shining moments on this show in a while, so forgive me. I've got a few shining moments to highlight here. Biggest shout-outs I want to give are to the two female drivers that qualified for the A-Main and the Chili Bowl this year. I want to give an update on each of their seasons, Kaylee Bryson and Jade Avedissian. Kaylee Bryson just wrapping up her year. Rookie season in USAC Silver Crown, 5th in points and Rookie of the Year. So congratulations to her. And then huge congratulations to Jade Avedissian, Extreme Outlaw Series champion. So a great accomplishment for her. I think those are two names you really have to watch for the future. I think whatever career path they end up taking, whether it's in dirt racing or, coming over to a series like NASCAR or IndyCar or, ARCA as a stepping stone to that, two names certainly to watch here over the next few years as to what their career paths will look like. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to Mariah Boudreau. It's been a while since we saw her in ARCA West. She made a comeback drive this weekend at the Bull Ring. Unfortunately, got into some trouble in the end. I think she ended up 15th or 16th, somewhere around there in the final results. But still great to see her back out there again. It's been a couple years since we've seen her in the ARCA Menard Series West, and hope to continue to see her in that 77 car and get a few opportunities here and there. I know the season's coming to an end here. But we'll see what plans she might have for 2024 going forward.
When it comes for me, some of the shining moments, definitely I think the big news of Bianca Bustamante, McLaren, the driver development program. We know that team has a huge fan following. To see them all get the news that, hey, this is one of our newest drivers, Bianca Bustamante, helps get her more following, more attention, and bring that following to F1 Academy. Another one I have to say, throughout the year, I know the season is wrapping up in the ARCA series. Tony Branniger as well. Earlier this year, we were talking about, okay, Tony seemed to be off to not exactly a great start. Didn't have a full-time ride. A lot of questions. It seemed like once she did that truck series race, it just started falling into place for her. Better performances in ARCA. And now everyone's wondering where she's going to go. I would say that. And then also my third and final shiny moment has to be from Grid Tonight, Beth Peretta being there, being interviewed, and we're very thrilled to hear that the Women with Drive Summit 3, fueled by Mobil 1, sold out. You can still attend virtually. It'll be streaming thanks to a lot of their partners, but overall, I think it's just very exciting to see the momentum that organization has. And with that said, we are all out of time. We want to thank our Patreon subscribers, Colin Michelle, Mark Robin, David Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. Each and every one, their support means the world to us. Help us pay the bills, plan 2024, especially on-track coverage for you, the viewers. We encourage you, if you're watching, hit buy me a coffee or hit the YouTube thanks button. Big thing is, if you want to send some money to a particular member of the Grid Network team, mention in the comment and we'll forward it to them. And the easiest way to support us is subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell icon, as well as check out our social media presence. Visit gridranking.com for all the links. And if you're interested in covering motorsports, looking into motorsports journalism, I'd like you to check our LinkedIn page for opportunities as well. For Ben Schneider, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.